the time. So
Right. And you don't have to go to Zumba and you don't have to, do these mad, crazy cycling classes and things like that. We just need to walk,
right. Yeah,
walk.
just get out and well, I mean, even like gardening and stuff like that, we used to chase chickens and go get eggs and, all of that stuff. And we don't really do that stuff anymore. And I mean, I wish I could even have chickens out here, but they're considered livestock and they won't let me do it, but
Uh,
um there's a lot of things that change that or that kind of
right.
alter that perception. So I'm
Even,
going to stop sharing for just a minute. I just wanted to make sure that I could do it and everything was all good. And I forgot what I was doing there for a second. But we're going to do like 2 more minutes and then we'll let people come in and then we'll go ahead and get started because I don't want to. I'm going to review what we did last week at the end of last week. So I don't want anybody to miss the review. And are we live
No,
on
not
Facebook
yet.
yet?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering. So we'll give it a couple more minutes while we're talking and letting people come in. But yeah, I think about this stuff way too much. I have way too much time on my hands. Number one, number two, I can't turn my brain off. So I'm always trying to not complain about things as much as I try to be part of a solution.
Mhm.
And so I brainstorm within myself, within all of my different personalities. We all brainstorm, and we often come up with different ways to think about things.
oh,
We often bring up different solutions. But I mean, I'm always debating myself, like, what about this? What about this? Well, then not only that, and me and my daughters were debating this the other day because I'm sorry, I don't want to get off track. I'm trying to keep an eye on the clock. So we got about 4 minutes to kind of chat. But I, the thing with living in two different worlds too, I mean, that really weighs heavily on everything that we do because what we are grown up to do, what we're taught to do, what is expected of us in that world, and then to translate it into this world, and how are we supposed to conduct ourselves and move in this world as far as watching a healthy diet and blah 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 blah, and then you go out into ceremonial world or anything that has to do with ceremony, regardless of what you do as a ceremony. A lot of times it has to do with fasting and and
yeah.
holding off or feasting on certain stuff that maybe it's not good
Mhm.
for you. But the fasting thing is a big thing
It's
that
huge.
yeah.
Hmm.
And so and our bodies have been in tune with it for so long and gotten used to it. Then how do you regulate that whenever you
I
have to
started
go through that kind of a situation? So
I I started doing intermittent fasting, and
mhm.
I have done a very, very strict keto diet. For over a year I ate under 20 total gross carbs a day, and unfortunately they made I nearly went blind from it. I quit making
Yeah.
tears. And they won't tell you, they'll say, oh, they have such wonderful blood sugars in Alaska because they eat such a low carb diet. They won't tell you that Alaskans are number one in having colon cancer. We need those fibers in our diet. So I eat, I do all of my eating in 6 hours. And, after being someone who used to eat the strictest diet, you know what? I'm eating sugar, flat out sugar in my 6 hours. Never been able to eat sugar without being bloated and gaining weight. And I have had so much success with just doing that because I wasn't raised to be able to go to somebody's house and to turn away the food that they're offering me.
Right. See, that's the other thing that we were talking about. Okay, we got like 2 minutes. Let me elaborate on this a little bit. That was a big thing that we have talked about in the past is you do not turn away food. That is
No,
absolutely disrespectful. And
it
here's the
is.
reason why. The story behind it is that what's being offered to you may be the absolute only thing that those people have in their lives, and they're giving it to you. And for you to turn that away, how disrespectful is that, right? Like,
Absolutely.
or just even in general, you don't go in and say, well, what's in this because I can't eat this. Like we don't do that. That is not in our culture. And so that's been the hardest part, is especially when I would have to just take breaks if I was following any kind of a dietary regimen of any type. Like for a while there, I was having to control my blood sugar. I had to drop 15 pounds just to see if it would curb it. And it
Yeah.
did. I mean, but to do that in the middle of that, we'd go to ceremonies or we'd go to visitors,
Hmm.
to visit and do things. And, you you just have to silently suffer, and not really say anything, or just be respectful to the point to where you kind of like, in a sense, it was kind of dirty keto at that time. It was dirty, and we would just do it when we could, and not. But anyway, it's a big thing, and I feel bad because we talked about how overweight that I had gotten when I had kids, and it wasn't because I was just blah blah blah. It was because I couldn't stand to leave a plate, with food on it. And so I would not order food for me. I would eat my kids' plates up, So in turn, I was not wasting anything because you grew up in that mindset. And so, I had to be okay with just cutting everything in half and leaving it alone. And it's still hard. But
you have to do that. Eat your enzymes with every meal that you eat. That is not something that you're accustomed to eating, and take a probiotic. It makes it so much easier, because I used to get sick. I'd be 100% keto. I be fasting before going to ceremony, and then I would just eat what was there, and it's really, really hard on your body. So get your enzymes and take your enzymes, and they will help you to properly digest those things that you're not accustomed to eating. I was also raised, if there's meat on that plate, an animal died so that you could eat that, and you're going to throw it away when literally someone died for that. I mean, that was just, that's just a no-go.
It's really kind of crazy to have to think through it and everything, but that's kind of part of what we talk about too, a lot of times in culture and dealing with a lot of this stuff. It falls into the culture. We don't just talk about language. Just let's go ahead and get started. While we're talking about this, I still have yet to figure out how to be able to see y'all and still see this at the same time. So we'll figure it out whenever I have a little bit more time. But let's just welcome everybody, which just means it's really good to see you all here today. So we are going to go through some real quick things at the very beginning. A lot of times, basically all I want is to make sure that everybody stays on. If you start getting loud and I can hear you, then I'm going to call you out. If you don't go on silent, basically, to mute yourself, be aware of it. If we're getting any feedback, it's not necessarily because I can't stand feedback. It's because it doesn't like me, and so it's an anxiety trigger. So so what we're going to do is we're going to, in most of these classes, what we usually do is we will usually go over briefly at the very beginning of the class what we went on, what we talked about the week before. So that's kind of what we're going to do. That's the way that the classes usually kind of run. So what we're going to do is at the very end of last week, if you were here last week, remember I said we'll go over these again next week because we did not get a chance to really go over them very well. I literally just sped through them. And so I don't want to leave you like that, because the end game of this class is for you to learn, not for me to just spit commands at you and expect you to absorb, because it takes a minute to kind of get into that mindset. So we're going to go over basic commands. Basic commands are where we ended last week, and I keep repeating myself because I'm trying to figure out where I am. Okay, so we discussed that spelling can vary. Let's go over that really quickly. We went over all of the rules and everything of what I will do and what I'm not going to do. And remember that spelling can vary. And I say use your best mental grandma voice, because I always push this, that whenever, or I always get teased about this, because whenever I'm speaking in the language, a lot of times people say that I sound like an old grandma. So I just kind of embrace that these days. I used to kind of take offense to it, but these days I just embrace it. So use your best mental grandma voice when you hear these. And sometimes it helps you to recollect. If you have heard this in the past, it helps you to be like, hey, this kind of sounds familiar if I say it in a different voice that's not my own, right? So when you read these, and so we're going to go over all of these commands, and then I'm just going to briefly go through them. Legas, weavas, wakas, nojas, lipkas, dashkas, yagabas, humbas, babas, logas, which are the different levels of eating. Remember, we went over that. Ishkas, nafkas, takkas, magas, gejas. There's two different ways to say. If I'm saying say this, like if I'm telling you to say it, I'll say, maro magas. If I'm telling you to say, say thank you, I'll say that. Fickleness, and we talked about the double K's or the double consonants. Basically, anytime you see a double up letter, whenever I write it, it's not always the case. Remember that in your head. Remember when you're reading through other curriculum, it's not always going to be the case. But if you see this on here, it's the way that I say it. And so when I have a double K, a double anything, N, double R, whatever, then that means you're going to enunciate or emphasize that sound. So it's going to go from the K in magas, like G, to fickleness. It's more of a K sound, like a harder K sound. So stop is fickleness. Huegas, tiboyas, aguigas, adiloyas, and that's to gather, like when you're gathering toys or, you know, picking up all of the beads that you spilled on the floor, which I don't do. Haboyas, hitchas, mijas, emanejas, abilas, akkas, aklobas, okojas, hejas, yahegas, panas, sagas, hayas, bajas. Oh, sorry, I lost my spot. Tilayas, nausejas. Inga is yes. And then these are the various ways that you will hear no. Mongo or mongoto, or it's no, basically. It's a no for me. Monks is kind of a shortened version of mongo. And higos, sometimes you will hear that it's a little more of an archaic form. You will kind of see it present sometimes in words. So sometimes you'll see that. And maybe it's more of an I guess. Like my desk. Like can I go outside and play? Did you do your work? No. My desk. Go ahead. You know, like go ahead and go out. It's like I guess. So. But I've seen it interchangeably used or heard it interchangeably used as maybe. So we'll just kind of leave it at that, and we can always discuss it later. The reason I'm going through these so fast is because we did go over it last week, and what I do want to do is encourage you to go through the week lessons the week before. Maybe even watch the recorded versions. There's an option for you to go back and review if need be. So I don't want to linger too long on these. If there are questions, then we can answer those here in a little bit whenever we break for that spot. But what we went through really quick was what causes these to be commands is you'll see at the very end. We'll start seeing it a little bit because we're going to learn how to read, but we also want to learn how to hear it. Start listening to your inside voice. And since you're on silent or since you're on mute right now, you know, your microphones are off and everything. It doesn't matter who's around you. Say these out loud so you can hear your own voice say them. You want to get used to hearing your own voice speak these words, because a lot of times in the communities, you're going to get shy because you're scared, because you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to say this right. But if you've heard yourself say it 57 times, then it doesn't matter if you're not worried about saying it right at all. You just want to get it out there. So if that gives another person an opportunity to correct you, if not, it also gives you an opportunity to teach somebody else the word that you've learned. So I want you in these classes to get used to hearing your own voice. So talk to yourself if you want to, just for an hour while we're doing these, you know, these classes. So if you're at work, I mean, you can mouth them to yourself, you can hear yourself. But your outside voice a lot of times sounds different than your inside voice. So just don't be ashamed to speak up and speak them loud. So we're gonna go to the next one. So we did fly through these really quickly, the opposite of these words. So we learned that we had to negate those commands. So if I say dashkas, which means jump, if I'm telling my kid, my child, dashkas, and then they jump, right? So that's what we do. So dashkas, jump. If I say dashki got, and I said that with a little wrinkle in my forehead, like dashki got, like don't jump, right? Don't jump. If I say hageki got, which is hagekas is to cry. Hageki got, if I say don't cry. Makgot, don't say that. Now there's got. Now there's is to bother something, right? So now there's outwegas. I can say quit bothering it. Naldejigot is don't bother it. And I like to picture when we're learning these particular words, picture yourself getting onto a child. Picture yourself getting onto a dog or, a pet or anything really that you would get onto or try to keep them from, trying to keep them out of harm's way, basically, a lot of times. And so picture that and use that. You can say it to, your peers and everything too, but for some reason, if you picture yourself getting onto a kid, it makes sense as to why you would say these things. So, but anyway, the dash KOT, which will present itself in these lessons as got, or sigot, which is kind of a longer version. And these will all make sense later on down the road. I just want you to be familiar with them at the very beginning so we can introduce them. They are both relative to each other, and it denotes the negation of the command. It's kind of the translation for don't. And I say kind of, anytime I have a direct translation, it's a loose translation. And I say it's a loose translation because this could mean something else for somebody else. I mean, not that it doesn't mean don't. I'm just saying that they would maybe explain it differently than I would. So, but for right now, for, all intents and purposes of this class in the end game, it's the translation for don't. So if I say, how do you say don't run? You would say litkigot. You wouldn't say litkawegas. That means quit running. That I'm saying say don't run. You would say litkigot because litkas is to run. Okay. So we learned how to conjure these up so you can practice them. And if you are a traditional English learner in any way, then you will remember how we, how we conjugated sentences and broke down sentences and things like that in your literal mind, or maybe you have to write these things down, because what we have to do is we have to teach you how you know how to be taught, and then eventually kind of break that cycle so you can learn how to hear it without having to write it down all the time. So that's one of the reasons that I don't hand out sheets, like lesson plan, lessons and things like that. I want you to hear it. That's why I talk so much. Hey, that's my excuse to talk so much. But that's why I talk to you guys all the time, is because I want you to hear it, because many of us in these classes are in areas and communities where you don't hear it. Many of us are not even in state. So remember that. And I have to be mindful of that too, because we take that for granted here in Oklahoma, very much so, because we have the ability to go find places and locations if we really want to seek it out and listen to it. We have that ability. We are, not all of us have that ability to do that. And so I try to make sure that I speak as much as I can, as clearly as I possibly can. And if I need to ever repeat anything, do not hesitate to ask. But this is the way that we break it down. Laksas, laksigot. Laksigot means don't lie. So, and you can read just as well as I do. I hate it when people just read presentations to me when I can read it myself. So I'm just throwing this in here for you. I didn't even put this one on the list because I was 98% sure everyone knew what Loxy meant. And if you did not, I apologize. Oh, that means Loxy isn't even on that list of the words, the previous slide. It's not even on there. And that's also a very early lesson to where I realized that there's not a lot of people that would automatically assume that I shouldn't automatically assume that you know what Loxy means, because, it means lie, but around here, most people, already know that, but I kind of have to catch myself later on. Like I said, this was early in the lesson plan, and I was like, I need to quit assuming that. So any questions or answers or suggestions or adding to the discussion? If not, if you do, then, jump in real quick and say something, because I can't see your face. Okay, Amber, yes. What's your question?
Sorry, I was muted. You think I'd know by now. So when we're conjugating the negative part of the verb, so some of the verbs have like a double E, and some of them have, or a double K. How do we know when to use like the verb, or can you go back? So like,
so like if you, okay, let me pull up a laser pointer. If you look at these, ooh, I'm going to be so fancy for a minute. Okay. I'm going to act like I know what I'm doing here. So do you see this laser pointer? Because I can't see y'all. So right here at the very end, do you see how all of these are all commands. They're all ending with that VS, like Lagos, Litkus. So the root word is what we didn't, so all of these have US or VS at the very end of it, the us sound. And then right here where I didn't really talk about this enough, take the root word. We'll practice this as we go. This is, but for visual and light bulb sake, it's somewhat as follows. So here's the magas. So here's the root word. I say root because I'm from Oklahoma, but root word of magas is magi. And then so that E right there, that kind of makes it a root word. And the only time that you'll see it is whenever you're adding like additional commands onto a root word, a basic root word, because most of the time you're going to hear it kind of like this. But the further on we get past the intermediate, a little bit more into the little more advanced speaking engagements and things like that, by that point you should be able to understand. Now, as far as knowing when to change it and when not to change it, that kind of takes a little bit of familiarization, because this is the end game is to learn how to speak, and it's in an intermediate level. Then we're going to learn the very basic way to do this right now, because right now what I'm teaching you is kind of what we would have learned up to like a little kid's version, like maybe a preteen version way of talking. And then the older you get, the more you hang out with those old folks, right? Because we don't get to sit around and talk to old folks a lot. We always get in trouble whenever we were that young. So we're not used to sitting and being peers with those people. So a lot of times what we heard was this up to this age range. And so right now we're going to probably sound like little kids when we use this in conversation. However, the older you got to hear those bigger advanced conversations, the way that they added on to those words. So what I guess to answer your question really distinctly is, it's hard for me to say how you will know how to write them down. I want you to learn how to hear them. When you do hear them, how it changes. So listen. When you hear these basic root words like the doshkas and weavus, wakas, deboyas, when you hear all of those, hear them. If you have to, turn off your screen so you don't see them, because you're not going to always be able to carry this script around with you when you're talking in the community, right? So, but for right now, the end of this is what makes it a command. I feel like I'm not being very clear, and I feel like I could be clearer if I had a minute to think about an answer that would better describe what I'm trying to say. For right now, we will break each of those down into a root word and then add on these. And I usually will denote an ending or a new additional, an addition to with that little hyphen basically right there. But as far as like the double K's, like fikonas, you wouldn't cut those unless it's a descriptive, and we'll talk about descriptives a little bit later. These are more action words. So you would say fikonigot. See where that us would go away? This would say wegigot, deboyigot. So every time you see that VS, it'll go away, change it to an E, and then add it. Change it to an E and add ing. Do you remember the ing rhyme or sing song thing that we learned? So when you're adding an ing, it's kind of like that. You change it to E and add your ending to it. And I can't even think of what we're going to call these. I guess we can just call them endings for now. But hopefully we'll get to a different lesson, and this will help to answer that question. And I might trigger something tonight, and at 2 o'clock in the morning have an answer for you, and we'll talk about it next week. So I'm sorry if that didn't answer your question properly, but we'll try to get to it as much as we can later.
It did. I think I was wondering if there was like a rule, like if certain words have this, then you use the
I like to say that we would have rules, but and I would like to compare it to English, and it actually would work if I compared it to English, because it's so screwy with the way that we learn words in English. You know, sometimes you read it this way, but we had sight words, right, when we were learning. So, because they didn't always follow the rules, the I before E, except after C, you know, those kind of things like that. They don't always follow the rules, because sometimes we say, I don't know, sometimes we say CH is a k sound, like Christ, CHRIST, right? And then sometimes it's a ch sound. So when do you know when it's a CH or a not CH? It's because we learned sight words when we were younger. We just had to learn that that's what it was. That's kind of the same gist of what we're going to be learning. Is sometimes that rule will fit and sometimes it won't. And so I don't want to teach a rule and then break it. Does that make sense? I don't want to confuse you on your journey for self-teaching. So as we get these questions, we can kind of come up to them, answer them for the time being. And then if we see something that negates the rule that maybe we learned that day, then we can discuss why. Because sometimes these questions don't get answered, or not answered. Sometimes these questions don't get asked, because growing up, we just didn't ask those questions. We just, just assumed that they knew what they were talking about. We just listened to them, right? So it is kind of hard to compare it and make it fit the mold of teaching rules of English. Hopefully we can get a little more clarity on that a little bit more, but I'm not going to lie to you right now and tell you that there's an absolute rule for everything, because it does not always work. Does that make sense? I'm sorry. Okay, so for lack of a rule, I'm going to actually take a note of that and see if there's a better way that I can get that across, because I feel like that was not clear. I confused myself anyway. So where we ended up was at the very end, I told you that next week we would learn me, my, mine, you, your, yours. So me, you, he, our, this, that. It seems like not very much, but this is going to be a pretty cram-packed lesson, and we'll just continue to overlap. If we don't learn it all this week, we'll go ahead and go over it again next week. I don't want to leave you guys behind. I know this is a free class and, and all of that stuff, but I want to make sure that the end game is actually what you set out to do. I want you to learn something. And even if it's just the very basics, that's what we're going to do. And so we're going to harp on it. I don't want you guys to lose momentum, but that's what we're going to be talking about in this lesson today. It is 8:30, so that's right where we're at. Let me stop sharing, because this is from last week's, and I will go on to, I got to find the other one first. Blah, 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 blah. That was a very good question though, Amber, and I really like it when we test that, because even if we don't have an answer for that, we can include that in a lesson in the future, or even the next time we have these classes, we can address it. So awkward lull in conversation. Okay, here we go. And give me just a second. But let's see, where am I? Okay, there we go.
Can I ask one more question while you're
Yes, absolutely.
Because I know that you're teaching us the command versus like the root, like verb. Would you suggest us learn like the root word or the command and then conjugate from the command?
So I would suggest, because this is a conversation class, that if you're practicing and self-studying on your own, that's absolutely fine to do the roots. But in the essence or the spirit of the class, there will not be a point in conversation where you will need to say the root word. Does that make sense? So if you want to learn how to write sentences and read it and maybe write stories, and then yes, I think that would be good for you to maybe go through and just get good practice on how to break that down, so you can learn how to add them on later for your own edification. That would be perfect. It would be wonderful to self-study like that. However, I don't want you to get so caught up in conjugating that when you go to speak, that you've spent more time conjugating than you have actually learning how to use the words in a conversation. Does that make sense? That's kind of my priority here, is getting you to talk. As far as self-study, it's absolutely however you need to get to your end game, and however you need to study and self-study on your own, then absolutely do that and make it a practice. You know, you can conjugate everything, you can break down, switch them over to actions, and if they sound funny, you know, then you'll start to recognize that, and you'll just be that much more ahead whenever you're looking for those words. And that is by no means an extensive list of commands. It was just something to throw out there for you so you can go back and kind of self-study and get the conversation going of which commands do I need to use that are going to be relevant to me to use, right? So if I'm work as a journalist and I need to know how to say who, what, when, where, how, then those things are going to be, you know, the things that I want to focus on. If I want to learn how to say I'm writing or write or hurry, or, you know, things like that, is, you know, l'apprendre is like hurry up, like we have a deadline, right? So I want you to focus on what is going to be good for you to learn, what's going to be relative to you to learn, so you can go on home and self-study and create that world for you. It may not necessarily be the same things that I want everybody to learn. Does that make sense? Because it might even confuse some people if they feel like that it's not relevant to what they're what their end game is. So
yes, that makes
self-study, absolutely. Do whatever it is that you need to do to help you. Do what is comfortable for your home. But in no way, shape, or form do I think that it will hinder you at all to do whatever it is you need to do to learn the words, however. But that's also why I introduced this stuff to you, so you can take it back and make it relevant to your home and how you want to talk. So yeah, we'll come back to that a little bit later. But if that kind of gets the gist of what I'm here, like I said, my end game here is to get you to talk and to understand why you're talking the way you do and when you do, and why you don't say these things and things like that. So as far as the in-depth part, that kind of would be like more of one of the beginner conversations, so you can gain familiarity just with the language in general. And that's definitely a big part of it. So okay, so let's go ahead and get through these. There are 14 slides, and we are on slide 2. Most of them are kind of visuals. Most of it's going to be discussion. So if at any point that anybody wants to jump in here or needs me to answer a question, then either raise your hand or turn off your mic and be like, hey, whoa, 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 because like I said, I can't see your faces, and I don't know why my screens are being weird, but we're going to go into it right now. Whose is it? Mine, yours, ours, theirs. So at this point, this is where I was talking about TPR the other day. When we refer, or when we're talking, we tend to use our hands. I'm pretty animated when I'm using whenever I'm talking, just in general. And this is a part where you'll notice whenever I'm talking, just in general, you'll notice that I use my hands a lot. I will tend to say yours, mine, ours. Now, if you have to do that to yourself so you can get some familiarity with what you're saying and attach it to that, it helps. It really does attach it to it. So if I say chi, chun, or boom, then, or in, then that like shows the direction. And I didn't really want to akin this specifically to an English lesson. And so what I refer to these words as are directionals, which means which direction are you talking about? Are you talking about you? Are you talking about me? Are you talking about over there? And the reason I don't call them possessive, because like I said, this isn't English. The reason I don't refer to them as possessive is because it'll change. Sometimes it'll change, like it's not belonging to something. It just means that it's over there or it's this one. So it'll make sense later. I just wanted you to know that I can't akin it specifically to an actual English lesson, because I want it to be different. I want you to be able to stand aside and understand that this isn't exactly the way that you're going to learn English. You know, it's not the same way. So mine, yours, theirs, ours. There's various ways for each to visually identify during reading. We will stick with the basics, but always listen to it in conversation. There are different ways to say some of these. I'm going to give you a few options, but there are probably more, way more in your area. Whenever we did our last language assessment with ANA, we, I think, identified 16 different dialects, which means that sometimes there are up to 16 dialectal nuances on one particular way to say something. And that is different families, that's different sides of I-40, that's different sides of the country, it's different communities, the way that they say things. Sometimes individually from family to family, and inside the same family, people will say things differently. And the reason I'm telling you all of this is for you to open your mind to understand that there is no one standardized way to speak our language. And that is the difficulty of teaching, is because there's no standard way. Now, there's commonly accepted ways, colloquialisms, there's common ways to say things in particular communities. But if you were in Oklahoma and you lived in the 27 different communities that we might be a part of, they might say one thing different in each individual community. So I'm doing this so you can unwrap your mind, your literal, your mind around there only being one way to say something. And I feel like I have to repeat that because it is very imperative that you understand that and open your mind to the fact that even if I teach you this way, you might hear it differently. You might read it differently in a book. And I want you to understand that could be another way to say something. And the reason I say this is because we, as I was speaking in the rules last week, if you were here, there are so many people that are not open to that idea, and they will be the first ones to come at you saying, that's wrong. And, you know, and sometimes they mean well, it's just in delivery, right? Sometimes your delivery is off. But a lot of times they're just closed-minded to the fact that this is how they learned, this is how their grandma said it, so that's the only way, right? No, that's why I want you to understand that is the way that I said something might be the different way that Hope's grandma said something, might be the different way that Anne was taught. And we're all, you know, hunky-dory on the same page on this, but just, I can't emphasize that enough in this discussion, that please be open to the fact that there are other ways to say things. These are just simply a few. Possession is often corrupted in regular conversation because if I'm talking to you, a lot of times pronouns are even just, you know, corrupted. So we don't even really have pronouns. If you hear an elder talk, they're not going to say she, they're not going to say he, they're not going to say there, or well, they'll say there, like they'll refer to somebody or something over there, but they're going to say, you know, that person, that boy, they can say it like that. But a lot of times you just assume the if it's a masculine or a feminine pronoun, because we don't have a whole lot of pronouns that are singularly feminine or masculine. So they're kind of all encompassing.
Are you sharing a slide?
Yeah, can you not see the slide?
No, we
Slides
can't
aren't
see
up.
it.
Okay, hang on. Have you seen any slides at all
No.
since I've been talking?
Just
No.
That's why I raised my hand, because I was going to tell you the slide wasn't showing.
All right, let's see if I can do this. Are you seeing that slide?
No.
Okay,
No.
let me see if I can do something real quick.
Earlier when you had the slides up, though, like we could
In
see
the
them,
last
like
one?
the gray ones, but
Oh, okay, so this is where we're
yeah,
at, right?
but not.
I thought you were just making us listen.
Oh, goodness. I wasn't trying to just make y'all listen.
I think when you tried to switch over to the new slide, the current one is when we're
I
lost.
think that's what happened, but let me make sure that I am making sure that I'm not jacking with, because remember that one time, Hope, I had to log off and then log back in because my computer was overworked. Hey. All right, let me see if I can get to it now. Here is, yeah, it's trying to be real dumb right now. All right, let me pull it up real quick. I'm gonna minimize you real quick. Talk amongst yourselves. Give me 3 minutes. All right, what am I doing here? Here we go, there's that. I think what happens sometimes is when I have my third screen up, when I'm working during the day, it really jacks with like my connectivity and the fact that I barely am computer literate as it is. Well, at least it wasn't just all talking throughout that first one. It didn't make any sense. All right, let's see. Why am I not picking this up? Okay. Here's the Zoom meeting. Here's my share screen. There it is. Share here. This is me talking through everything. Can you see that?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So here we are. Let me start from here, from current slides, which is just the very first one. And I've talked so much, I'm only on like slide 3 or something like that. So this was, whose is it? Mine, yours, ours, theirs, right? Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then here's where we were right here. So various ways to each, okay, for each to visually identify during reading. We'll stick with basics, always listen conversation, because like I said, that doesn't always necessarily work. If we're just reading, sometimes it doesn't translate into conversation. Possessions often corrupted in regular conversations. There's a reason for that later. To my knowledge, we have no pronouns that are singularly feminine or masculine. Practice these through the day. It is always a relevant conversation when we talk to ourselves, right? So it's always relevant when we don't have anybody to talk to. We can talk to ourselves and we can make it about what we're talking about. And I literally talked through this entire slide. So I'm just on slide 3. So we should be caught up right here. And I, me, mine. I'm trying to, I need to quit messing with stuff. That's what I need to do. Quit pushing buttons, Natalie. Okay, I, me, my, mine. This is where I was talking about, if you can see me though, right? So I'm not just sitting here going through motions and it's not doing any good. Okay, so what I was saying is a lot of times I'm very animated. And so whenever I'm talking, I will say I, you, me, you, us, even when I'm speaking in English. Well, in this particular situation, I will say these show themselves in conversation often as ja, dun, jum. Often, but not always, and jum are used for inanimate objects or for non-human life forms. So if I was to say, ifa is the word for dog. Ifa, if I say, ifa, I'm referring to it's my dog, my dog. In a lot, or a lot of times that that's how it's used. So when you see it, when you're self-studying, when you see it, sometimes when you hear it, you will hear that slight difference, the sound instead of sound. But they all generally, like I said, if you're open to the conversation, that this is different ways to refer to things. When we're reading and when you're self-studying, it will make sense when you don't just see the one way. You're going to see all these different ways referred whenever you're, looking at literature or any lessons or anything that you get from wherever, because all of these are used sometimes interchangeably. That's why I wanted to open your minds to make sure that you don't think that there's only one way to say mine or me. So, ifa, this is an example. Ifa. That means my dog. Jahewa, my wife. Jabaki. Has anybody heard of that? Ever heard of Jabaki? Jabaki is the word that you'll hear for angry. It can be directed towards a person. Chibakiri, if I say that, I'm asking you, are you mad? Chabakiro is, if I say, I'm angry, I'm mad. So the literal translation that I see, and maybe not everybody thinks about it this way, but the word for puffy, like swollen, puffy, your hair getting puffy, or a puffy piece of grass, or the grass getting carried away, is like baki, like puffy, right? So, and what do you do when you get mad? They, especially in cartoons, what do? They puff up and they get full of air, right? So if I'm asking you if you're angry, it sounds like I'm saying, are you puffy? Like chibaki, or chabaki, like I'm puffy, like I'm all taking in all this air because I'm upset, right? Just huffy. So that is the only way that I can that I can help explain to you that sometimes it's a literal translation. It's a descriptive of being angry. But also the cha and the chi, there are different ways that you will say mad. Even though most people will just say one way, a lot of times you can direct it. Is it you mad or is it me mad? But we kind of embrace all ways, meaning just mad in general. So that seems like a little bit of information that maybe it's unnecessary right now, but you'll understand it later. You'll thank me later. No, I'm just playing. Undot is like it, and like I said, loosely translated as for me. But undot jahodojis, in some of these words you'll pick up later. I'm just using them for the sake of example because we don't really have a whole lot of vocabulary right now that we're going to learn later on. But for the sake of this example, I'm going to use this. Undot jahodojis. So this sounds it sounds so like English, As for me, I am tired. But that's what that means. It's like unda, like me, as for me and myself, jahodojis, I'm tired. Now, don't try to break that sentence down yet because we're going to go into that later on lessons. Right now, I want you to concentrate on the lesson at hand, the ja part and the un part. So these are words that you can add in your vocabulary though right now. If you're taking lessons or taking notes or whatever, feel free to write this down, but also remember that these slides are available on the page, so you can always go download the slides too if you need to be. Ani, you see the question? Ani is like if I say you're talking to me and I didn't know you're talking to me, and I say Ani, me, I'm saying that, right? Anio. If somebody says jahodojis, like that sentence, if somebody says anda jahodojis, I could say anio, like me too. I'm tired too. I say that to my kids all the time. They can never be tired by themselves. It's always me too. But and then the next one is anda. So in the area and the community, you'll learn it's always a joke. There's hardly any serious moments that we're talking without, jostling at somebody or making a jab or, just poking fun. But a lot of times this is used as a joke. Like if somebody comes in and sits down next to you and they have a burger and a Sonic drink or, just a fountain drink, and you're hungry or thirsty or whatever, you'll be like, anda. Like, what about me? I'm hungry and thirsty too. So they'll say, anda. So that's why I put, what about me? And you see the picture of Bob right there from La Bamba. That is the epitome of anda. What about me? I'm in this too, right? So that is all. This slide is all me and ways to say me or refer to me. Me. It sounds so selfish, but you have to learn how to do that. Me, my, I, mine. So that goes for all of those particular pronouns as well. So I, me, mine. They'll be used for all of those. There's not one that just means, one or the other. Then we're going to go on to you, your, yours. You, your, yours. while I'm teaching, I will literally do this. And sometimes it's not because I want to, it's just habit. You, if I say, Tinda. So anyway, it often presents itself in conversation as chi, jin, like chin, jin, jim, or jimmy. So here's going to be another root word lesson, Amber. When we have root words for our, eventually we're going to have lists of kind of vocabulary. And the reason I say eventually is because when I taught this class last time, the previous students in the beginner classes had 16 to 18 weeks of vocabulary lists. So I often will reference back to lists and word lists that you had learned in the beginner classes. If that is something that we want to bring forward into this class, maybe we just need to refer to some of the lists. They'll be in the Dropbox. Then, Hope can give all of that information because we do have those lists from the previous beginner class in last year's class. We have all of those lists in the Dropbox and all of that stuff. So for right now, this class will assume, because it's an intermediate conversation class, this class is built to assume that there is a level of vocabulary that you already have under your belt. So intermediate class, beginner class. So if you need to refer back to those lessons and get some vocabulary, they are available is what I'm saying. So right now, ingi is your hand. Ingi, your entire hand, just generic part of your hand. There are individual words for your fingers, individual words for those, but this is just the generic word for hand. Ingi, you add the chi to it, and then you just drop that E whenever you're writing it, if you're writing it. But if you hear it, jingi, ji-ingi, ji-ingi, jingi. So sometimes it'll flow together so quickly in conversation now. In conversation, when you write it down, you're going to be confused. Where do I drop the E? When do I do this? How do I accent this? Listen to it. Jingi. When you hear it in conversation, it'll roll together and it'll sound like jingi. Jingi. That just means your hand, your hand. If I say jangi, ja-ingi, that means my hand, my hand. And we're not going to talk about our hand because we don't all have the same hand, right? So it would be something that you just wouldn't say. So jihi. So the word for husband is ihi. The word for wife, we learned in the last slide, was ihewa, right? Ihewa. So if I say jihewa, I'm talking about your wife. The previous slide, I said jahewa, right? My wife. If I say jihewa, I'm talking about your wife. Jihi, your husband, yours. Jimboko, the word for ball, just a ball, like you bounce a ball, boko. There are other words for the other part that we would refer to as a ball. And we will learn that in a grown-up class later on. But boko is a ball, like you bounce a ball, throw a ball, whatever. Jimboko, that's your ball. So you, all of those different ways to say that. So just like we talked about, what about me? Then we have a way to say, what about you? If I say, Jinda, it's loosely translated, right? Like I said, what about you? And sometimes it's preluded with an E. Like I said, we're always joking. So if somebody says something about me being late, then I can go, Jinda, you just got here too, like that's just something. And I say that because this is something you'll hear in a regular, casual, joking conversation with your cousins, your friends, your church members, whatever around here. If you just run into people, they're always joking. There's hardly ever just somebody. There's going to be somebody sitting over there, just stern and stoic, but for the most part of it, in the conversations that you want to have, that you want to get to when you come to Oklahoma, or if you go to those communities, is you want to laugh and joke with them, right? Because you want to know what's funny and what's, you know, how to kind of razz them too. So if I say Jimio, like I said, Anio, like Anio, me too. If I say Jimio, you too. Anio, me too. Like, or yeah, me too. I'm tired. Anio, I'm tired. Jimio, that means you too, you as well, you also, however you want to say that. I feel like I'm going super slow, but I want to be super thorough so you're not super confused. So, and then at the very end, let me check the time really quick. Oh goodness, it's 9 o'clock. See, I need to just, I'm sorry, we started about 10 minutes late, so I know that we're going to go until at least 9:10, 9:15, and I do not feel bad if you have to dip out on me. I apologize ahead of time. We'll try to be a little more timely in the future, but we always, I don't want to say we always go over, but we do tend to go over because I talk a lot. So this is why I need you guys to reel me in every now and then. Us, our, ours, and plus we had technical difficulties and operator issues, and you know, the dog ate my homework. Okay. Us, our, ours. So this is where I do this. That's all inclusive, right? It shows up in conversation as boom, bon, bon, boom, bo, bo, me. Now, if you look at that, you're going to say, man, all of those sound exactly alike when I said it, right? That's kind of adding in a nod to me discussing and telling you that spelling, a lot of times interchangeably, you will see it spelled this way, but you'll also see it spelled this way. It's not going to really alter the way you say it or the meaning a lot of times. It's basically, it's going to throw you off if you're not all accepting of the fact that some people spell things differently, because it's basically how they say it or how they hear it or how they learned the alphabet and what it said to them. So boom, 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 bo, 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 me. And in this case, the U and the O still have the same emphasis. They're both going to say O. One's just going to be longer. One's going to say bon, and one's going to say boom. So it's a little longer, and that's just the way some people talk. Some people speak and say things and enunciate differently. So bon jogo. Jogo is the word for our house. Jogo. Not to be mistaken for joga, which is the word for paper. So little tiny differences, but jogo. Jogo is our house. We say bon jogo, our house. Bon jogo, our house. Bonda, like with anda or tinda. If I say bonda, I'm talking about what about us? Like, you know, you guys went on vacation. Bonda, what about us? If we wanted to go to vacation. And then just like we said, anio, like for me too, when I said sohorojis, you know, and somebody says bon, you know, anda, I am too. Or anio, I am too. Jimio, what about you? Or you too. Bomio, us too. So in this example, it says, Dad says, Deloise, which means I'm hungry, literally, I'm hungry. Then the kids say, Bomio, you know, we are too, is what they're saying. So that goes over done, ja, then ji, jin, jim, that's you. Then bom, bon, bo, bomi, bomio. Seems very simple, the lesson that we were learning today, but it really is a lot to do with the introduction of how you're going to accept what you learn. Because like I said, I don't want you to get confused and say, well, in the book it says this, or so-and-so says this. Then, you know, I want you to be able to say, okay, well, this must be a different way to say it, and then make it relative to what you already have known. Or as you're reading and self-studying, it's not going to confuse you and you're just going to stop and be like, oh, well, I can't be doing this right because I learned this differently. I want you to realize that there are various ways. And then this is He, she, it, they, theirs. Something that's over there, not inclusive to me, you, or us over here. We're talking about somebody over there, something over there. He, she, it, a dog, you know, your aunt, your cousin, you know, whatever, over there. They're not included in this little familiar right here. So as stated, our pronouns are not really gender specific, although there's existing discussion about family terms that apply to family members that may be used with specificity, like jajoshti, jawanwa. Sometimes those are used as older sister, younger sibling, or younger sister. It depends on the family. So, but that is the only time that I really, me personally, and remember, I do not know 100% of every word. So for me personally, I know that I don't know any other gender specific terms. So for the most part of it, you know, like, because like in Spanish, there is gender specific ways that you refer to things. We don't really have that so much. And if we do, I am not aware of it. Like I said, I'm not the be all end all, but I'm not aware of it. These terms will show or present themselves in conversation as E, M, N. And sometimes that will look like a root word, like, because you're talking about just in general, that thing, right, over there. So it's kind of a generic. Emifa, there, his, her, dog. Somebody's dog. It's not mine, though, because I would say Jaifa, right? Or Amifa. If somebody's, not mine, not yours, it's not, you know, ours, it's somebody else's dog. In Jogo, there, his, her house. Jogo, remember we learned that in the last slide. Imadat, this is just an it's an exclamatory. And just for the sake of this conversational class, I'm trying to throw in little bits of things that you'll hear in the area. And imadat, it's usually kind of a it's kind of a some kind of way attitude whenever you hear it. Usually used in gossip time. But like if me and somebody over here is chumming it up and talking about somebody that's walking across the room and maybe their shorts are too short, or you know, something like that, then we'd be like, Madonna, like look at that. Like, you know, it's an exclamation or exclamatory about something over there. So just kind of a fun word, but you will hear it. Emanedus. If you remember when we were talking about the alphabet. Emanedus. Help them. So this is a vocab command from week 1. It's on that list of the vocab that we learned at the very beginning of this particular slide as well. If I say Amanedus, like help me, right? Help me, Amanedus. You'll see this in Crete hymns. A lot of times it will be a declarative, you know, Amanedus, we're talking to God to help me, right? Amanedus, if I'm getting onto my kids because somebody is taking in their groceries or trying to load the groceries at the grocery store, and I say, Amanedus, like go help them, you know, like go help them over there. So there's directionals there that I want you to be, when you pronounce and enunciate your words, I want you to be very cognizant of where that emphasis lies. Because if you say, Amanedus, like, and you try to tell me to go help somebody else, I'm going to help you and wonder what you need help with, right? So be very deliberate with your enunciation. That's why I want you to learn how to speak it and hear it in your own voice, because you'll get confused, somebody will get confused, and then you're going to stop and go, oh, did I say it wrong? And then you're just going to clam up. And this is going to be the last one that we talk about. There's 2 things that we're talking about, but before I go forward, does anybody have any questions? I'm going to potentially, let's see, it's 8 after, so I'm going to go 5 more minutes at the very most. Let me look. Yeah, we may actually just go over these next 2 slides and then we'll pick up the rest of it next week. I think I talked way too much, and then with the difficulties at in the middle, kind of sapped us of time. And anyway, we're going to pick up these next 2 slides, and it's going to be specifically talking about which one? This one or that one. And this will help us when we're starting to have conversations, because I'm going to roll through these a lot, and I want you to be very aware of what these words mean. So 5 minutes. Yeah. Okay. So we'll do this next couple of slides, and then I'll open it for questions. And we're nearly done. I might be able to push through if I stop talking right now. Okay. So this and kind of here. So if I say, okay, so many references to this and alternatively will be used as here. Relativity and vicinity, meaning if I'm talking about this piece of paper, this pen, this paper, I'm going to say ya zoga, this paper. If I'm talking about this piece of paper as opposed to that piece of paper, then I'm going to say this one here, right here. Or, okay, so this is this, and then that's that. So that's what I'm saying is the difference between this and that. But if I'm saying, if somebody asks me where I'm sitting, and I say, yeah, man, leitoe, I'm not saying I'm sitting this. I'm saying I'm sitting here. So alternatively, that's where I'm trying to tell you is sometimes the ya will be used as like a location and not necessarily a specificity like this as opposed to that. Okay, so all that confusion out of the way, let me get to talking. References to this alternatively will be used as here. You will hear it come up in conversation as hiya, hiyan, ya, yun, yama, or yaman, and sometimes even hiyaman. So yaman ochlegas can be polite or assertive. That can be a command. Anytime I put an exclamation point, it's assumed it's a command. You don't always have to say it all some kind of way like a mama. You can just say yaman ochlegas. Like, you know, casually, if somebody comes into your house, then sit here. Like, please, I implore you, sit right here in this area right here that I have cleared off. Or you can holler at your kids because they're bouncing all over God's creation. You're like, like sit right here. But you can also say, like if I'm standing here and I'm pointing at this chair, I can say, sit on this. It kind of implies that as well. So there's no way that you can specify it. You just have to listen to context. You have to be in the conversation. Does that make sense? We'll go on. Ya sada lani hombus. Sada is the word for apple. Lani is a word for green. We discussed this in the beginner classes with that list, and I specifically used this sentence because it had been introduced in the beginner's class. So if you don't know those words, then that will be a new vocabulary word for you, but also they will be on the Dropbox lists that we have available as well. Ya is this. Sada, apple. Lani, green. Hombus. Hombus is on that word of command, eat. So if I'm basically saying, eat this green apple. Look at the picture. Eat this green apple. Let's say she said that to you. Yes, adelante, hombus. Like, eat this apple. So, like I said, there's an example for in a Mvskoke hymn. If you look it up, Yama Ishtimitkiran. Yaman is talking about these people, the I don't want to say they're poor people. Ishtimitkiran is kind of like humble or like meager kind of a translation. But if you listen to that song, then you'll hear you're talking about these people here. Do not pass us by. You know, these people. We had discussed that particular hymn at one time, and it's a lot of times you can look to those hymns for a lot of the older way that people say things and storytelling kind of stuff, and you'll see them or you'll hear them in those hymns. That's also another way for you to get some type of exposure to hearing the language if you are not from an area that speaks. So here's the next one, and I think this is the last one actually. That. and kind of over there. Like I said, when we want to talk about this or here, then ma is over there or that. Same discussion as this. Remember to understand relativity. It presents in conversations as ma, mun, maman, mayma, maymun, ma, momat, and mot. So anytime you see these, a lot of times when you're reading on self-study, if you see any of these derivatives of this particular word, then that's a lot of times what it's referencing. And we're going to get into literal translations, because the way that I feel like it helps a lot of us to learn is to break it down into a literal translation so you can understand what it's saying. And that's why you kind of have to have a lot of it in your own brain once you hear the literal translation, and then you understand kind of what it means a little bit more, because it's not going to break down straight across into English at all. Hardly ever. So one of these words, okay, simple usage today, but when reading, this will help you understand differences in usage, dialect, and tense change. Okay, I just said that. Okay, maisti, maisti, maisti. I'm going to let you hear the way that you will read it and the way you will hear it when you hear it in conversation. And this is literally the last slide. So maisti, 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 maisti. So sometimes you'll hear, when you read it, you're going to see maisti. You're going to hear it in conversation as maisti. It's going to sound like you're saying maisti instead of maisti. And it's because it's been smushed together and condensed. It's still the same thing. It's just they've put it together so hard. I mean, it's such a hard contraction. It's still saying the exact same thing. It's not really even chopping anything off, but it's going to sound like it. Maisti maman takuidat, hobo seniguros. That's a long sentence, and I'm sorry. I think I just threw stuff in there just so you could hear things. Maisti maman takuidat. What I'm saying is that person over there that is standing. So the person that's standing over there, hobo seniguros. Hobo seniguros means they don't have any sense, like they're not wise. Crazy, you know, just, you know what I'm talking about. There's always one around. Mada and mada. Mada, that's what it is. Like a lot of times people will go, mada. Like, look at that. It's just an exclamatory. What about that? It's used in a gossip circle, like I said earlier when we were talking about the person that was walking across the room with short shorts. That's pretty much one of those little words that we use too. So, like, look at that. Somebody that's dressed some kind of way, or it could have been, you know, what is that on the floor? Somebody dropped a cup. I don't know, just anything like that. So, clear as mud. These are the review words that we learned in this particular lesson, that you may not have learned on, you know, in your previous experiences before this class. And if you have taken the class before, and you know you're one of the people that had gone through Anne's beginner class, then these should all be absolutely relevant and familiar to you. So random vocabulary words that were included today that you might not have known before today. Hodoji, tired, as in chahodojis, I'm tired. Iloi, Iloi. This could be just a different way that somebody spells it. Hungry, as in chalois. Ihi, husband, as in chihi. Ihewa, wife, as in chahewa. Boko, ball, as in amboko. Jogo, house, as in bonjogo. Ifa, dog, as in ifa, jifa, jimifa, imifa, bomifa. Sada, apple, not to be confused with shoda, which is sky. Sada, apple. Lani, one of the words for green. You also might hear a different way of saying that. I don't want to confuse you right now. We'll talk about it later. Istimitkidan, the poor, the needy, the suffering. That was the word I was trying to come up with earlier, like the way that you'll define that word. Istimitkidan, yama istimitkidan. Isti is a person, just person in general. Isti jadi, red person. Isti lusty, black person. Isti hutki, white person. That's where those different versions of, you know, the different ways to say whatever, you know, different, whoever you're referring to. Isti baba is the word we use for lion, but it is Isti baba. It's a person devourer, aka a man eater, right? So that's where lion, the word lion comes in. Isti holwi, they say that for an angel. It just means a person that is high, up high, not a high person, but a person up high.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
When you were talking about like red and black, when I was younger, we would say like stajati, stalusty. Is that not, or is that just another way of saying it?
So if you, in English, you know that we have contractions, right? We also have slang terms. So contractions just means that something is knocked off the front of it. So if you take that E off of isti and you say isti lusty, and then you take the E off and you just say sti lusty.
Yeah, that's how that's how we've said it.
Sti jati. That all it is just a contraction, basically.
So that's okay.
Yeah. It just means that. So people, I do know that the corruption of sti hetki, because hetki is white. Hetki, that is the word for white. But you'll hear people say stiheki, you know, or stihetki. And hetki is not a color. It's not the version, but it is the way that some people say that. So, but they don't realize that that is a literal translation of you know, isti hetki, isti jati, isti lusty. That means red person, white person, black person. So even when you say shoe, like stilabega or tilabega, ishtilabega, that is the same thing. That sti.
I've heard it with the E knocked off.
Yeah, so it's
my whole life.
It's just a contracted version of the entire word was isti, and hardly anybody says all of it.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I was like, I think I used to say it like so. Madame.
Yeah, and so when you hear somebody say that, then that's what you'll know that that's what they're saying. You're just saying a contracted version of it, and you'll hear those. We will learn so many different variances of different ways to say things as we go. This is just the second lesson. We'll talk a lot about this later, and it'll start to turn on light bulbs, right? That's your first light bulb. Yay!
I got my light bulb, ladies.
Hobosini go. So hobosinga is the word that we use for penny, right? We've had different stories of why, and they say they base it on a penny saved as a penny earned, because, you know, money it's a foreign concept to us, and so we had to describe it somehow. But hobosini is the word that we use for somebody that's wise, that has a lot of wisdom, and we refer to a penny as hobosinka. Well, hobosini go or hobosini got, remember we negated that, right? So if something is wise and something that is hobosini got, if I refer to somebody as hobosini got, that means they don't have any wisdom, right? It's not wise. Hadam, if I say hadam, I mean again, normally. Sometimes it's also, or again, you know, most of the time it's again. So Hadamiza, if I say do it again, we heard that a lot, like whenever we'd run in the hall and fall, and they told you not to run in the hall or run in the house, right? And you fall over and you start crying or whatever. My grandma would say, Hadamiza, like do it again. And, you know, we'd be like, no. Anyway, so Hadam Magas, if I tell you, say it again. Hadam Magas, say it again. Okay, Ohitsagits, let's look all over, or like to review. Oh, because on the very top of this slide, it says Hadam Ohitsagits, which means let's review. So Hadam means again, Ohitsagits means let's look it over again all together. So let's look at it, let's all look over, and then again. So that's my word that I came up with for review. And I didn't come up with that, let me quit lying. That's a word that is used to as review, right? So, okay, And I feel like that I've heard my voice so much that I am sick of it. So I'm sorry. We dipped into the next time sentence structure a bit, which we're going to continually add on. So it's one fluid motion, right? So we're not just slapped in the face with something we have no clue what's going on. Do not overwhelm yourself with formal lexical or conceptual semantics, unless of course you're a linguist. And if you are a linguist and you're in this because you want to understand, where all of these words come from and everything, absolutely, by all means, go into it. Go crazy, because it is going to drive you nuts. But don't overwhelm yourself. If you're just, the end game is for you to go talk to your grandma, or call somebody on the phone and ask them a question, things like that. Don't overwhelm yourself, because that's what causes a lot of people to lose traction, because they feel like that they've dipped into something that they're not prepared for. That's why we're baby stepping our way up. We're going to continue with basic structure. And I say basic because we're going to be making statements and we're going to go over and review previous lessons. We're going to be going basic, like it is a ball. What is it? What did you say? Did you say that to me? Things like that, because this is an intermediate class. It's basic structure, and hardly ever am I in a community where I have to say more than a back and forth conversation. No, there are those storytellers that sit in the corner, and that's not me. That's way too advanced. And for this class, we're not going to get to that point. I want you to have a good, solid learning of how to talk smack, how to listen to somebody talking about you, and also how to ask where the bathroom is, or are you hungry? And I'm hungry. And did you hear what they said yesterday? And I think they said eat. And when is it time to go do this? And, just your basic average things, right? And we're going to also explore descriptive vocabulary a bit in the next one, in the next classes. And I'm going to make sure that I go over these lessons a little bit more and kind of make sure that I adapt it to the people that were in this class. A lot of us have come from the previous beginners class, and a lot of us are new. So I want to make sure that we don't overwhelm those people that hadn't had the benefit of that. But like I said, they are all available. A lot of those lists are available in the Dropbox, and Hope can get that information out. If you need to contact me, you can email me at this email, or one of the best ways to contact any of us, because if I don't check this email, then Hope will be on me if you message on the Facebook page. So that's the best way, I think, to contact us, is to contact one of us, because it'll either be me, Hope, or Ann can get to it. We all get notifications on our phone and things like that from the website or from the Facebook page. So that's one of the better ways to contact me. But if you need something further than that, or maybe it's a little more lengthy, then absolutely email me at this particular email address. It's hedajishka@gmail.com. If you Facebook message me, please make the first words. I have had people Facebook message me, please make the first words be regarding language class or language related, or tell me you're not a creeper, because I am horrible at checking my messages, because that one weird inbox that everybody always kind of dips into, that you're scared to open it because you don't know what's going to be in there. Sometimes even innocent people fall into that, into that weird inbox. So, but if you manage to get through on Messenger, I'm horrible at checking Messenger too, by the way, at my personal Messenger on Facebook. So if I see, hey, language class stuff, I'll jump in there and check it out, a lot of times, because a lot of times it's just a question that people have, or is it okay for me to do this? So please be patient with inquiries. I am often in a staff of one. I also go to school. I work full time, and I have 1,000,000 kids, and we're dealing with everything else. So I sometimes will pop you right back on there and be like, hey, here it is, because I just happen to be checking it. And then it could be 2 days before I check my Messenger. And I also have this is an update, I have actively started just very, very recently, started a TikTok, because I wanted to put some language content in there, 60-second increments, just a really quick, fast and dirty study of, a particular language, because we're trying to get outreach going for, that particular genre or generation of people. And it is a pretty expansive generation of people. It's not just younger kids on there anymore, but it seems to be kind of another way to reach out and get outreach for a lot of people that may not have had it before or don't have Facebook. I may choose to bring up your inquiries and question in Q&A at the end of class the next week, unless they're going to shame you out. And then even then I might, no. But I might bring them out just because if they're good questions, like really expansive questions that are going to help more than just, I don't want to just tell you and then, and I would like to probably share the question. I might not call you out. I might just be, hey, this came up and I would like to share this with the class. So I am back. I dropped the sharing here so I can run through this really quickly. I think we answered most of these. We can't see the slides. I'm sorry, Jane. Somebody should have said something, man. Like, hey, I can't see anything. Telling y'all, you don't feel shame to call me out on some of that stuff. Slides that
We were waiting for you to take a breath.
I couldn't even see the chat to even see Lucinda being like, hey. Our family church is Tallahassee Indian Methodist in Preston, Oklahoma. I can sing hymns better than saying sentences. Now this is helping understand what I've been singing. Absolutely. And if you need translations for those songs, a lot of times I have those available. They might be even online these days. But literally, if you just find anything that has a language, we have first readers available. I say we, I mean, there are first readers available in general, like on Amazon or things like that. I even encourage you, if you're going to go buy a dictionary, to not just get like this dictionary. Don't just get this dictionary, get the older one too, because that'll show you a lot of archaic forms, but this one will show you a lot of generalized, like new word translations. The older dictionary, the red or the gray one that, from back in the day, they'll show you archaic words, but then the green one will show you more, what's the word I'm trying to sound fancy and I can't even remember my fancy words, but they're more current words that you will hear on a regular, like there's a word for lipstick, right? So that's what my kids always laugh, like there's a word for lipstick, and I'll go, well, there's always a word for anything if you're really inventive enough. But it absolutely will help you understand. Like I said, I feel like that I go almost too much over things, but I want you to have a good solid understanding of that particular lesson before we move on. I don't want you to get lost in that whole kerfuffle, and I don't even know what that word is. I just made that up. I don't want you to get lost in all of that and then be like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. And then if you get confused, that's where you shoot us a line, shoot us a question, messenger, something like that, and say, hey, I got confused. I didn't want to stop the rest of the class to ask you this question because I'm scared. If you've got anxiety, I completely get it. Shoot us a message, and don't just sit there and be scared to say anything and speak up, because that's why we're losing our language now. It's because there's a lot of people that were scared to say anything. I'm absolutely going to be here to drag you through the mud if I need to, if that's what you want me to do. So contemporary, yeah, Jana, that was the word, contemporary words. What did I say? Updated. Updated words. So anyway, we went way over. I will profusely and immensely apologize for going way over. I promise you it'll happen 75% of the time, just because we like to talk. If you ever feel like you need to dip out, then absolutely leave. And just let us know. Be like, hey, I got a meeting to go to, or hey, I'm about to fall asleep because y'all are boring me, or hey, just whatever. This is a family here, so feel like that this is a safe place. Absolutely encourage you to do your thing, however you want to learn, and move on with it. And if I can help you in any way, then just keep letting us know. If it's something that you feel like that we should go over again next week, then do that. So, but with that being said, is I don't want to take up any more time. It's 9:30. We've gone 20 minutes over our start time. And if anybody needs to dip out or say anything else, then let me know. And if not, then I will talk to you guys next week.